Well, no, clearly from the start of the elections, preparatory stage, you would hear terms like truncated timetable. You would recall there was a application that was made to the Constitutional Court. Imagine. To say that no, let's rather not have these elections now. So many things have really came to the fore in terms of IEC readiness and preparedness and their ability to go forward. You've just stated something very important: the kind of systems and the technology that they have been using. Just yesterday, the CEO Simon Mabolo promised the nation that by midnight last night,
yes,
everything will have been completed, which means by now we shouldn't be at the 50-something% of the results as we hear.
Yes.
So it's very clear that every day, every night, the IEC is limping from one crisis to the next, and that shows only one thing: they were not ready, they were not prepared.
Mr. Kana, you also participated in these elections. Your experiences with the readiness of the IEC?
Well, I think one has to look at both the internal and external factors that impacted on the performance of IEC in the current elections. In terms of the external factors, obviously the elections took place under this COVID-19 environment. Now, you would understand that there are regulations that needed to be complied with so that the elections could minimize the increase in terms of the infections of COVID-19 to the South African society at large. What I would observe is that IEC was generally non-compliant in that regard, and the elections themselves could have been one of the super spreader events because of that fact.
So what do you mean was non-compliant?
You know, COVID-19 regulations require certain things in terms of social distancing, in terms of sanitizing, in terms of wearing of masks and so on. And generally, those were not fully observed, you know. There was an attempt to comply with some of the regulations, but generally, IEC was found wanting in that regard. Now, the second other factor is the situation that prevailed before the elections. My colleague here has mentioned one of them, the Constitutional Court application. So you can see that IEC was already confident, especially the recommendations of the Mfenebe Commission, that the elections were going to be postponed. So that element, I think, there was a bit of laxity on their part. Now, one other issue that I would like to talk about is in the area of voter education. There was minimal work done in that respect of voter education. So we have a situation where the new entrants, those who have become eligible to vote because they are now 18 in the past 5 years, did not receive adequate information and voter education for them to participate in the elections that took place. But also voter education for the general public did not take place. And therefore, voter education is also part of the mobilization effort of getting the nation behind the elections, getting the nation to be in the right state of mind to participate in the elections. And I think IEC was also wanting in that respect. Now, the other internal factors, you know, when you look at the voting stations, you would be shocked. There were change of voting stations which were also last minute, you know. You'd find that generally the electorate knew they're voting in a particular station. When they get there, they say there's a small note there that the voter station has changed. And you'd find that impacted also the participation of potential voters because they get discouraged. But then parties had to arrange transport taking people from those previous voter stations, voting districts, to the new ones. So then the last thing is the gadgets. in the area of ITC, the gadgets that they were using, they were jamming like nobody's business. And you can imagine people would come to the voting station and they'd say we have a technical glitch, come after an hour, after 2 hours. Some who are committed would come, but the majority would then say, I made an attempt, and they would not return to the voting station. And one wonders what could have happened, because in the area of ITC, we expect IEC as the responsible agents for the election to be using the state-of-the-art technology to be able to meet the requirements of the elections, particularly these local government elections, local government elections.
So, Mr. Mann, just to come back to you, do you think that from what Hanari said, do you think that from the Moseneke pronouncement, IEC was then caught napping with the decision of the Constitutional Court to say that the elections must happen not later than the 1st of November?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to throw in spanner in the works again.
Yes.
The issue of factional battles within the ruling party.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you remember, the build-up of that court application was these discussions even attempted in Parliament, whereby some members of the ruling party and some opposition party leaders agreed that no, elections must be postponed, sponsored a discussion at the level of National Assembly, that let us try to discuss this matter.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure what really happened, but if you remember the court ruling, it sent them straight into National Assembly. We have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
We deal with constitutional matters. This matter belongs to the National Assembly.
Yes.
Why don't you assemble a parliamentary gathering somehow where you can take a decision that would effectively amend the constitution, and then you can bring that to us. But for now, we cannot deal with that. So clearly they thought that there's a shortcut. They really thought that no, we'll simply use Constitutional Court to make this application, plus the recommendation of the Moseneke Commission to say that we have no choice. There is COVID, Parliament cannot meet properly, all this and this and that. So in general, I agree with my colleague that yes, they were coordinating, they were not prepared. That is why in terms of the budget, if you remember, one of their reasons also accompanied in that application was that they do not have resources. That is why after the court ruled against them or ruled not in their favor, then people asked, journalists asked, now will you have the money? Because you in your application you insinuated that you don't have the budget. That is enough. So clearly the IEC was not prepared. I listened carefully, discussions, questions that were raised, and the manner in which IEC responded. You could see that these are people who just come up with brave and bold appearances on their faces. But believe you me, if I was able to see inside, I would tell you that internally they reflected a very serious turmoil within themselves, just holding their breath that let this thing just go through and we are out of here. The quality of their product, I don't think they really care about it, but that is the most fundamental principle about democracy. You need a free and fair elections. I think about 3 to 4 parties, major parties have complained that this IEC, the manner in which they've done things is wrong. The DA said that, IFP said that, many parties have complained, including even the ruling party. Some of the people have complained. So you will be surprised, why would institution that supports democracy, such as the IEC, why would they not really see that this is not about the ruling party, this is not about any individual or their own egos or their own professions, but the integrity of the systems of the country themselves. So when the IEC underperform like this, South Africa is reflected very badly outside. Let's wait and see what other election observers are going to say. But for me, they were not prepared. In fact, I regretted even myself the court ruling that maybe they should have just granted with different reasons. citizens, they should have just granted, but you can see that here we are just tiptoeing.
Yeah. Well, let's welcome our viewers. If you have just joined us, we are live on G30 TV, and we are on the roundtable assessing or reflecting on the elections that the local government elections that have just taken place. Now, looking at the messaging, the electioneering messaging, to get a sense that across the political parties, to get a sense that the message, the electioneering message, resonated with the reality of the electorate.
You know, the question of messaging is quite an interesting one, because one wonders whether even the electorate listens to the messages of the different What I have observed is that it seems that the voting pattern follows the historical pattern, you know, and the voters generally do not necessarily listen to the message. They look at the players.
But it seems to have changed. Look at KZN. Your traditionally you get your IFP and ANC. Today you have certain municipalities in KZN. DA is in charge of those municipalities, and I think NFP is in some way also is coming.
Yeah, what I had also observed with regard to the messaging is that there was little difference, especially on the opposition parties, in terms of the key messages that they were communicating to the electorate.
Yeah.
Examples of those key messages might be around the question of corruption, promise on improved service delivery, and so forth. And therefore, in that sense, with regard to local government as a delivery level of governance, the message were somehow similar, not necessarily the same, but were somehow similar. But we must also factorize the whole thing of resources. You know, recently I read in the papers that one donor has donated about 15 million rands to the DA. And the elections are in themselves a resource-based activity. So the parties that are well-resourced or generally have strong financial backers are able to take their messages to the furthest corner of the country. They are able to maneuver. They have a high mobility rate. You see. So sometimes it's not only the message that influence the pattern and the outcome of the elections. It's but the impact that comes from the ability of the of a party to reach out to a greater number of communities in our country. And I think from the example that you have given, DA is one of those resource parties. And one can also say, with regard to Action SA, you will see that they also had a little bit of resources. So it's a number of factors that impact on the outcome of the elections. The messaging is one part, but I want to say that I doubt that the majority of the electorate does focus on the message. The politics and the ideological base of the messaging of different political parties does not come out in the elections, in a sense that the electorate seems to be less interested in terms of ideological differences, but they also look at the historical performance of a party. I would also cite an example that I've seen in a number of voter stations. Say, for example, there are different categories within the electorate, and you take the category of pensioners, it is like a trend that they would vote in a particular way, despite what is happening. So what is happening in the country has no meaning to them, except the fact that historically they've been voting for this particular party, and it's a continuation of that legacy, which as elderly people they do not want to betray. Now you take the young people, the youth, you see, who are somehow despondent, despite the different messages from the political parties, encouraging them, firstly, to register, secondly, to go and vote. But we see that there is no significant increase in terms of the participation of the youth in the elections themselves. So either the messaging from IEC part in terms of voter education and from political parties is not convincing to the youth, or we have a youth that is generally politically not interested, or they have lost confidence in the whole electoral process. And it's a problem that we would need to address, because once there is this diminishing role of young people in the elections, that also impacts on the legitimacy of the whole election process and the impact of those who are elected, that the impact that they will have to the different constituencies that they have elected.
I'll ask you to hold on to that point of on the diminishing role of young people in the activities of society, because it's a matter that I would like us to go to town on later on. But let's give you your thoughts on the messaging.
Yeah, for me that was one of the most catch moment, because parties used populism, some parties used racism, some parties used xenophobia, and if you listen, some commentators today claimed that the DA was assisted, particularly in that area, troubled area of KZN. Phoenix, I think, where those murders of about 32 people or 36 people happened. Some commentators believe that taking that gamble was worth it, because the DA is said to have been winning that particular area, and probably because of the statement that they made, no matter how racial the statement was or it was perceived. Look at also Action SA. Action SA speaks spewed xenophobic language to say that undocumented foreigners, you know, whatever that meant, because we have different types and categories of, you have migrants, you have refugees, economic refugees, political refugees. They are very different. Ordinary asylum seekers, for whatever reason, you know, those that are still waiting for the Home Affairs to process their citizenship status, you know, or their presence in the country, you know. Also, that message, if you looked at it, somebody says no, they are the ones who came with a message that really resonated with the voters, because here they are going beyond many parties that have been in the field. You know, they could be number 4 party, between number 4 and 5, you know, and probably because of the bold statement they made as well. But if you analyze that, besides whether if it's xenophobic or not, is it a correct statement to make? Is it a correct promise that is genuine? You know, South Africa sits in forums, regional, continental, and global. You know, they sign peace agreements, they sign all sorts of treaties with other countries. If you recall, not so long ago, when Jacob Zuma came in, he stumbled into a system where former President Thabo Mbeki before him had already signed and agreed, you know, with countries in Africa that those that are having trouble at their homes, they can easily come here, you know. So it's something that is being signed, it's something that is being agreed to. So you as a local government campaigner, there is no way you can reverse, there is no way you can cancel, there is no way you can bypass, there is no way you can nullify a decision taken at that top national level. You know, you can't. So that's why I'm saying I do agree with my colleague that our people sometimes they need voter education. Secondly, they don't really understand the constitution and its imperatives in relation to local government.
Yeah.
What are the powers? What are the objectives and the functions of local government? How can a local government promise jobs when the national government shy away from promising jobs? It strictly tells you for us is to create an enabling environment for the corporates, for the captains of industry, for the business people, for the entrepreneurs to come in. For us is to attract investment.
And on that point, I would like also to bring you back on the issue of youth participation, but also linked to what Mpho is saying, the state of our nation, the consciousness, the political consciousness of our nation. What does it say about our state of the nation?
Yeah, maybe let me address the issue of the level of political consciousness of the nation. I would venture to say that, post 1994, a travesty has happened in our country. A travesty that there was depoliticization of the South African people. And I think that was done primarily by the ruling party in partnership with, because they had believed that, pre-1994, there was heightened political activity that was brought about by political consciousness. Now, in order to contain that heightened political activity, they had to somehow to defocus the nation on what they call critical issues of national importance. And other issues were amplified as the most important issues. We'd also be surprised that the dance and Kwaito culture was one of the issues that was elevated to national importance, whilst critical issues of political consciousness, of people understanding what is the content, what is the agenda of the national liberation struggle, those issues took a subservient role. Now, linked to this thing of political consciousness, there was also not much effort in promoting the culture of civic participation. I would want to bring up that issue time and again. That ordinary residents of South Africa lack that spirit of patriotism because it is not inculcated to them through, for example, civic education, national activities that promote national cohesion, and the importance of participating in processes that inform and determine what or does not happen in our country. You see? So we lack in that area one of political consciousness, where people can be able, with a measure of understanding, to take informed decisions about what is correct or what is not correct. My colleague Mo makes an important example in terms of a person who then say foreigners must go. You understand? But you can understand if the other African countries can take a similar stand, you will be shocked of the economic impact that will have to South Africa as a country. Because in terms of economic relations in Africa, South Africa is doing better than most African countries. And in terms of investment, you would find that South Africa has invested more in foreign countries, in other African countries, than they have here in South Africa. So when you look at the whole elements that bring forth xenophobia in our country, and you look at the economic relations and interdependence of South Africa with other African countries, then you then immediately pick up the danger that this is just an emotional decision that was used by some of the parties to invoke the emotions rather than offering practical solutions on how this issue of undocumented or illegal foreigners can be addressed. So we need, as a nation, to start looking at ourselves, because the democracy that we have, people look at democracy and they think of it as an innocent concept, that once they say you have democracy, then then you are fine. But democracy also can take a particular political or ideological approach.
Yes.
So in our country, we've got what is called liberal democracy. And liberal democracy, by definition, it means democracy for the rich. Now, that kind of a democracy is generally not an issue-based democracy where people vote on the basis of certain issues or political positions, but it is influenced more by resources. That those who control now the economy of the country are able to determine the outcome of the elections simply by how they fund the different political parties in the countries. And you would see that even the performance of the parties is informed or influenced by the amount of money that was deployed in the election process. So if a party says it has spent $1 billion in the current local government elections and another party has spent, say, R1 million, then you know that the outcome will reflect that kind of an equation.
Yes.
No, maybe just to chip in there. If there's anything that is terrible about the transformation process of this country, our founding fathers of liberation, Steve Biko, Mangalishan Watson, those on the left, the right, and the center left, Mandela, all of them, this is not the dream that they were hoping for. This is not the dream of Lembede. This is not the dream, really, of Mashinini, of Tiro, South Africa was supposed to be a totally liberated country from any influence, any direct or indirect control by foreign countries, particularly the West. But if you look at it now, tell me which party, you can look at the manifestos we are having here, or the adverts, which party is not somehow indirectly or directly influenced by forces of the West? None of them. Even the ones that you may think that they are radical, even the leaders that you might think that these ones are pro-poor, pro-black, pro-African, there's nothing like that. You look at each and every party, I don't want to say none of them is exempted. None of our parties and the system that we are in is exempted from neo-colonialist clutches. It's really free, from Western capture and Western control. Hence, some people debated seriously the issue of state capture. What kind of state capture are you talking about? Where do you start? Is the state captured during the Zuma era, or is this country really captured? It has been captured even before apartheid. Even after apartheid, we are still captured. So the issue is, where are we going as a country? Someone boldly asked me one day, but tell me, Mr. Mpo, do you think that the politicians and political parties in particular, do they really understand that ideological politics have died? Do they really understand, especially in local government? Are we here to speak about your ideology and your orientation, or we are here to speak about service delivery? If you listen very carefully, some of the parties continue to say, this is only about service delivery. This is not about politics. Don't tell us to toe the line. Don't tell us to vote by conscience. No, we have to vote by need of communities, and which is, I think, is section 152 or 151 of the municipal section in chapter 7 of the Constitution. It talks about basically service delivery. It talks about accountable local government. It talks about making sure that there is efficiency. But very few parties have identified issues of efficiency. Yes, there are some, the unemployed. What are you going to do with students? What are you going to do with people who do not have money? How effective do you think you can be? How very professional and efficient you think your policies can guide you in a country such as South Africa that is so much deeply entrenched in inequalities? So,
I just want to add a few ideas to what my colleague was saying. there is the national political framework in our country. And I've said earlier on that is that one of liberal democracy.
Yeah.
It chooses to call it neo-colonialism.
Yeah.
And now, you look at what people call voter turnout.
Yeah.
And we are struggling to reach a 50% participation of registered voters.
Yes.
Now, you may look at it as an innocent consequence arising out of the anger of our people for failure of government to deliver, particularly to deliver services. So they are saying it does not help to participate in this process because anyway, we are not benefiting from it.
Yeah.
I've said that it might look like it's just an innocent position that they adopt. But you may also be surprised, when they say you must fear the voice of the silent majority. You see, that it is also indicative of a growing trend in our country that more and more the members of the nation, particularly black people, and those who are the underclasses in our country, it's a reflection of the stance that they are taking now, that these electoral politics are not able to deliver the kind of freedom or liberation that they yearn for. So as more and more people fail to participate in elections, that equally means that the electoral processes in themselves are delegitimized. They may be legal because there are acts that says have elections in 5 years, but people would resort to extra parliamentary methods to fight for and to achieve whatever they believe are objectives or critical issues that needs to be addressed in our society. So in that sense, these elections are also a good indicator. We are talking about consciousness, we're talking about civic duty, are a good indicator of how far we are as a nation in terms of increasing the political understanding of the entire nation, of the importance of the electoral process, and at the same time, it is an indicator, of how effective and efficient, particularly local government is, as a delivery level of government. So it means people are generally saying that a local sphere of government is failing us. But then the last point that I would like to make is that local government does not set its own political or operational framework. Those are determined by national parliament. So local government has to operate within those parameters. So you would find that even when other parties come with initiatives that are meant to develop and grow local communities, but you'd find that they are hamstrung by the national framework, which in other words is not favorable for that kind of advancement or development. So we have to be worried, I must say, that if the majority of a minority becomes the governing instrument in our country, because once you look at it, there are two elements that I would like you to understand. Those who are eligible to vote. The number of those South African citizens that are eligible to vote. Now, the number of those South African citizens who have registered to vote, they are not the same thing. Those who have registered to vote are not necessarily the total number of those who are eligible to vote. Now, those who have registered to vote, out of those who have registered to vote, less than 50%, for example, participate in an election. You see? So we are talking of two concepts of voter turnout in terms of those who are registered to vote as voters and those who are eligible to vote but they decide to not to participate at all in the elections. And I'm saying we must fear that silent majority that stays away from the elections because very soon we will have a government that does does not enjoy what we call popular support.
Yes.
And popular support is what brings legitimacy. You may be a legal government, but if you don't have or enjoy legitimacy before the eyes of members of society, then you have a problem with extra parliamentary methods of political engagement are used to attain political objectives.
You know what we are saying, Kanare, it takes me to what happened a few months back at the KZN and Gauteng, or parts of Gauteng, the meeting that took place, and the sentiment there is that you had those who supported the unrest, saying that this is not a legitimate government. So it just reminded me of that. But also I wanted to say that do you think that the voter turnout, is it linked to the trust deficit for the social distance that exists between the political leadership and the electorate?
Remember the third element to your question. Remember, election is but one of the many instruments that we can use in a democratic setup.
Yes.
You have referendums, you have opinion polls, you have staying away from voting. People voting with their feet, which means by not going to vote, it was also a vote of no confidence, So it's also legitimate. Stone throwing, burning, arson, destroying property and all of that, yes, it's also another form. It's the most radical form of showing dissent, of showing that I do not support you. Remember, I think in Sudan, in most African countries, two systems are prevalent. If it's not a military takeover, just our northern neighbor Zimbabwe, it happens. It really happens. So if it's not a coup d'etat, if it's not the army arresting the leaders and taking out government by arms, then people popularly go take to the streets, call a shutdown and say that we do not want this government anymore. So it's not only really voting, but it's just part of those. And I agree with Hannah that really South Africa is sitting on a ticking time bomb.
I mean, like what you're saying is scary.
It's like the rebellion of the poor is just around the corner.
We just had 44% of voter turnout. 36% did not vote. Of the registered
serious warning to the state, serious warning to the government, serious warning to the elite that is running affairs in this country. Look, previously we spoke largely about neocolonialism. We spoke largely about the indirect or direct control of the state by certain forces. Remember the debate of the Reserve Bank. Remember the debate of who supports the ruling elite in power today. It doesn't start today. It starts really with the partitioning of South Africa itself, by those colonial masters. So the fact remains, really, are our people not aware? Are our people very blind? I don't think our people are not aware. I think our people are not even unconscious, but they have not mastered enough courage yet. Maybe the type or more of the type of the 1976 generation. Because what is happening right now, no party in power can allow itself to be taken out of power smiling. You can't. They will not allow it. They will do everything in their power. Many parties even rig, many states even put into the electoral agencies or IECs their own people that they know that they're going to stuff ballot papers. We just heard there was only one case that was reported that someone was arrested stuffing ballot papers. Now you can ask yourself, the integrity of the results that we are having today, are they not stuffed? Or was there no rigging?
It does indicate trust deficit on the part of the electorate, that what has happened, and it's very much unfortunate, that if a governing party performs in or behaves in a particular way, then how an ordinary person in the streets understands it is that parties generally behave in that particular fashion. So even when you offer an alternative, or even if there are alternatives, then it's a question of opportunity. They say you have not done what the governing party has done simply because you have not had the opportunity to govern. So it is like, and the concept is called the sin of incumbency. It is like, once you become the incumbent, once you become the governing party, you will also do as the ruling party. But it's also about political understanding and also voter education. That our people have simply got to understand that political parties are job seekers. They are saying, let us manage the affairs. They are job seekers, yes. In a sense that they say, give us the opportunity by voting for us so that we can manage the affairs of the country. Now, when people don't go and vote, and that's where civic education comes, they do not understand that by not voting, they are simply voting for the winning party, irrespective of which party it is. So now, coming back to what my colleague was saying, when people use extra parliamentary methods of struggle to achieve their objectives, it becomes sad, because I think democracy or a democratic participation is the best way that the citizens of a country can express their wish. Now, to the extent that our people are failing to go and vote, it also becomes worrisome. It becomes worrisome that they are failing to exercise one of the most important or critically important civic duties, being the right to vote. Now, when the elections have taken place, personally, I find it odd that people would now want to go to the streets. Even those that have voted for the party that will be governing, they go and march against the very party that they have voted for. So you can see then there is a form of disconnect, and that disconnect is brought by lack of understanding that it actually starts with voting. Once the voting process has taken place, we are stuck with whoever is governing for a period of 5 years. And I would also want to venture and say that I believe in a revolution. I've always believed in revolution. But then, once you use alternative methods of struggle outside of democracy, you have to analyze what is happening in the country. At least our country is having that constitution that allows democratic participation. We don't agree with everything that is in there. So we have to utilize political persuasion, to win or to lose votes. So I find it opportunistic and also dangerous. There's a point that I would differ with my colleague on, that people who talk of radicalism as if it is the same thing as talking about revolution. And revolution is about fundamentally changing a society from what it is currently to a completely new society. Radicalism has to deal with methods of struggle. That people might use violent methods of struggle, they might use populist languages, but they may not necessarily be revolutionary. They may be radical in their approach or activities, but they may not be revolutionaries in the sense that they want a clear departure of the current system or organization of life, which is largely a capitalist way of life, to a completely different society that accentuates different principles and values of life. So I would want us to use whatever little pockets of power that we have, like even GTV, to influence our people towards the right direction, to make them understand that even through parliamentary route, we can transform our society. But we need the majority of people voting the right way, So it's a contestation of ideas. Sometimes it takes time, but generally, even when you try to expedite like what you believe is revolutionary change, you may find that the level of understanding and consciousness of the people is not yet ready for that kind of a revolutionary transformation. And you find people now standing up against the very outcomes of the revolution that we had. We have seen it happening in many countries.
Yeah.
So the issue of political education, the issue of civic education, the issue of heightening generally the consciousness of our people to understand issues for themselves, to analyze issues for themselves, and to be able to take informed decisions remains central to any successful revolution.
Yeah, maybe before you come in, the issue of political consciousness and active citizenship. Who is responsible? You know, in your 80s, 90s, you had community youth organizations, civic organizations that were there. You know, think of your YMCAs, your
youth organizations.
Yeah, many of them, your Christ the New Man there, and so where young people would go there and be workshopped. You know, there were many kinds of those initiatives, and as you said that after 1994 there was this
depoliticization.
Yes, of our society.
No, hence not for me. I remain that stuck on a position that South Africa needs liberation, and this is not a statement that we should shy away from. The country is still in the clutches of Western domination. The country is still controlled by outside forces.
Yeah, but
there has been a very serious discussion within the circles of the ruling party. The issue of the Ruperts, the issue of radical economic transformation versus the issue of those who say they want to change, those who say a new dawn. Look at it. The principle, it does not really only apply in the ruling party. The principle is a South African phenomenon. It's what we are struggling with, the disjuncture between where the promise that was made to us. Our forebearers promised us that this country will be liberated. You will be free. Resources are going to be distributed fairly to you. It never happened. The Freedom Charter was not implemented. Some people, I for one, may not believe in the Freedom Charter, but there were masses of people who believed, who lost their lives and limbs, believing that the Freedom Charter will deliver. Now today, you sit in a country where there is so much resources. South Africa is wealthy. He said it, my colleague. It's one of the most wealthiest countries in Africa, based on what we were supposed to be producing for sustenance, for development, for progress of our own people. But we end up being slaves of other countries. Why? Because our country, we have just taken few steps forward and more steps backwards. So it's like we are in a stage of a revolution betrayed. We are in a stage of a deferred dream or dream deferred. So what this country needs, it does not need what is happening right now, where a few elite runs the country, where a few political elites in connection with certain individuals, powerful individuals in the world, run this country. This country is awaiting a revolution that is about to explode, and it will only take revolutionary means to free the country from the clutches and the doldrums of neocolonialism. No discussion, no parliament, no legislation, no policy can take South Africa out of the quagmire. Only revolution can do that. I'm not advocating that people must go tomorrow and burn things and destroy, but I mean, let us act in a revolutionary manner whilst we understand what is revolution, which means taking over the system.
Yeah, well,
to be beneficial to our masses, not to individuals, not BEE.
Yeah, well, let's welcome our viewers who just joined us. We are live on G-Thing TV, and we are joined by our two independent political analysts, Mpho Make and Khanare Lefoka. Just as we sum up, clearly there is no outright, there is no political party that you would see, particularly in the metros, is going to have outright win majority. Top of Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, Joburg, Nelson Mandela, and so on. Now, coalition, which means that we need to talk of coalition politics. Is it something that is viable for our country? Is it something that is sustainable, particularly given the partisan politics that seem to be very dominant in our country? And we have seen that in the past, coalitions, have met, come together, collapsed, to an extent that provinces at some point had to take over some of the municipalities.
I was just thinking when you are still asking that question that successful democracies, they have a few dominant political parties usually participating in the electoral systems, and those dominant parties, there may be 2 or 3, are the ones that give direction to the entire nation. Now with the local government that have taken place, we have seen a plethora of new players coming into place, you understand? Which also says to us that the creation of new and many political parties is not solely a solution to the problems that we have. But the creation of these political parties is also can be explained through opportunism on the part of those who establish political parties, that hopefully I might get 1 seat and I will get a salary.
Employment.
Now the next point that I quickly want to make is the concept of democracy. Originally they say demo means people, cracy means rule, people's rule. Now multi-party democracy then came, and then there's this thing that it's majority of a people at a given time determining what or must not happen in a country, right? Now, the majority of people in South Africa are black people. So we have a very odd system of democracy where the majority party governs in the interest of the minority of people. Even if that minority is white and a sprinkle of black people, but the majority does not benefit from the system. So when we understand that concept of democracy, then you will then be able to answer effectively the question of coalitions. The issue of hung municipalities is problematic. Here in Tshwane, of which Haranko is part of, we have seen that or we have suffered from the fact that one party has not been able to get a majority in the city council, and they had to resort to coalitions. And we have seen now the coalitions have been shaky because they are not based on principle, but largely on opportunism. Now delivery of services suffers, and in the last 5 years, I would say that the performance of the city has been dismal, even with the attempted coalitions. Now coalitions, of course, are going to be the order of the day, but I would prefer that in these hung municipalities, those arrangements of coalitions could fail, so that even the citizens could learn that they have to vote for a majority party so that that party can succeed or fail on the basis of its policies and programs, rather than failing because they would say we did not get with our coalition partners and so on. And coalitions are already an excuse for whoever will be governing for non-delivery at the end of a 5-year period.
In 2 minutes.
No, this pattern said marriage of conveniences and coalitions. Clearly, South Africa, we are struggling from understanding that concept. In other countries, Italy could be one of them. In other Western countries and other societies where democracy has matured, you cannot run a government with a dominant party. And I see South Africa going towards that trend quickly, that the issue of a dominant party is declining, and it's a reality we must live with, which means our democracy somehow negatively or positively is maturing to a particular direction. Yes, we are not going to escape coalitions in this country now. Coalitions are here, and then maybe even for the national ballot that is coming, this election has been a tester to see how to forecast the possible outcomes, which means parties, from me, I'm saying parties and individuals need to sit down now and ask themselves, why did I become a candidate? Why am I running? Is it for my salary? If somebody can pay me, can I live? Because if it is really about salaries, then it means we have wrong people there. But I would say that it's time for national thinking, proper national thinking, for the sake of our country, for the sake of the nation. We cannot have the Mickey Mouse that is going to unfold. You are going to see collapsed municipalities because of egos. Somebody has very few vote seats but wants to be the mayor of a metro or an MMC. So it means, yes, we are going for coalitions. I agree with Mr. Lefuga here that really sit on principle.
We are really out of time.
Sit on principle, let them be guided. Actually, Salga and former IEC Terry Tselane were suggesting that maybe it's time that the leadership draft some kind of guidelines that will guide coalitions.
Something like that. Now, here's the last question to both of you. The president or the ANC said that after elections, those councillors who would have made it to council, but fraudulently, you remember that the ANC had its own processes. Now he had said that, promised that after these elections, they will make sure that those people are chased out and the right processes are followed. Do you think this time the ANC will surprise us and keep to its promises and respect its processes?
Briefly, it's not the first time that is happening. That councillors who were not elected by popular vote within the ANC ended up being councillors, and there was a promise that they would be removed after elections, and nothing happened after elections. But especially in Tswana, we have to be worried with these trends of the Boko Harams,
killing
the John whatever, the Nkabi syndrome, where people are being killed. I think that is one of the potential igniters of violence within our communities, because we have seen, particularly within the ANC, that when people try to change and impose their own leaders, that turns into violence, and it affects all of us as the residents or citizens of this one. So I hope they will find a way to manage it, because if they do not, our communities are going to degenerate into the kind of violence we have not experienced or seen before.
I think our people must quickly return to ward committees. Local councillors are are ahead. They are leaders for communities. They are not leaders for any political party. Honestly, strictly speaking, this what contestation is about what councillors. It is really not about political parties. Yes, a political party can support. I can like the ideas of a political party, but the fact remains, here it's a 40% chunk that belongs to ward committees and the leader that they have chosen. So if somebody is chosen in 131 by people of 131, remember, it's not chosen by ANC people, Azapo people, PAC people, DA or what. It's chosen by by people in that ward. They are choosing this person as an individual who will represent them. There is no way that that a party can recall this person.
Yes.
I'm saying, I think it was just political. For the president to have made such a statement, it was meant to quell the fires. It was an attempt to say there are political killings for lists, for tenders, for whatever reasons. But for now, let's allow the process to continue. We'll fix it. You cannot fix it. When someone is elected, voted by people as a councillor, there is no party that has a right to recall this person. That is why after a councillor dies, there is no, it's a by-election, but in terms of the mayorals, it's something different, where there's a party list system. That 60% is allocated to political parties. That's where I think that statement can apply.
Gentlemen, on that note, thank you very much for honoring our invitation and participating in our discussion. On that note, thank you very much. That was a roundtable discussion episode for rounding up the elections, local government elections 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you.